The morning sun rose softly over the narrow streets, laying thin streaks of gold across the cracked pavements. The city was waking up sluggish and noisy, with vendors pulling open their stalls and buses exhaling gray smoke into the air. In the midst of the rush, a small figure moved quietly, her school uniform slightly faded, her shoes unevenly tied. Her name was Aisha, a little girl of barely 9, carrying a school bag that looked too big for her shoulders and too heavy for her small back. Aisha's world was simple, but honest. She lived in a one-room flat with her mother, who worked 2 jobs to keep their little home standing. Mornings were always rushed. Her mother left before dawn, and Aisha prepared herself for school, warming leftover rice from the night before. There was never time for comfort, but there was always time for kindness. Her mother had taught her that, even when life felt unfair, kindness was something no one could take away. The main road leading to her school was always chaotic. Honking horns, shouting drivers, the smell of exhaust, a constant battle between time and impatience. Every morning, Aisha waited at the same crossing near a small bakery. She liked that spot because the bakery man often smiled at her, and the air smelled like fresh bread. But that morning, something was different. Across the road, an elderly woman stood hesitating at the edge of the sidewalk. Her hands trembled slightly as she leaned on a wooden cane, her coat too thick for the mild weather. Cars rushed past without slowing down. A few pedestrians glanced her way, but turned their eyes elsewhere, unwilling to pause their busy lives for someone else's struggle. The old woman looked like she had been standing there for a long time, unsure how to begin the perilous crossing. Aisha noticed her instantly. Something about the way the woman stood, fragile, uncertain, stirred a quiet instinct inside her. Without thinking twice, she stepped forward, gripping her school bag tighter and glancing both ways. The signal light flickered red for only a few seconds, barely enough time for a hurried adult, let alone a slow-moving elder. The little girl reached the woman and gently touched her arm. The old woman turned, startled at first, then softened when she saw the child's eyes, calm, kind, and determined. Aisha didn't speak. She simply took the woman's hand and started walking. Their steps were mismatched, one small and quick, the other slow and careful. Cars began to hum impatiently, but the pair kept walking, steady and sure. A passing motorbike slowed down, a bus driver honked but didn't move forward. For a brief moment, the city's rush paused to make room for compassion. The little girl led the old woman across, their joined hands the only quiet truth in a noisy world. When they reached the other side, the old woman smiled faintly, a smile that carried 1,000 unspoken words. Her eyes glistened with something deeper than gratitude, something almost knowing. She mouthed something softly, a thank you perhaps, before resting her hand gently on the girl's head. Then she turned and walked away slowly, disappearing down the lane. Aisha stood still for a moment, watching her go. Then, with the innocence of someone unaware that she had just done something extraordinary, she adjusted her school bag and continued toward her classroom. What she didn't know was that her small act of kindness had not gone unseen. Mounted above the bakery's door, an old security camera blinked red, its lens capturing everything that morning. It was an ordinary camera, meant for shop safety, not stories. But sometimes fate hides miracles in ordinary lenses. The bakery owner, a tired, middle-aged man named Rafiq, reviewed the footage later that afternoon when a delivery dispute arose. As he scrolled through the morning recordings, the frame froze on an image that caught his breath. The little girl, hand in hand with the old woman, guiding her gently through the chaos. There was no sound in the clip, no dialogue, no special effects, just a simple, silent moment of humanity. Rafiq watched it again, slower this time, noticing how the child looked both cautious and fearless, how the woman's frailty contrasted against the strength of that tiny hand. Without fully realizing why, he saved the video. His teenage son, who often helped at the bakery after school, saw it later that evening and felt something move inside him, a quiet tug that only truth can create. On impulse, he uploaded the clip to social media with a simple caption. Sometimes angels don't have wings, just school bags. Within hours, the video began to spread. It started with a few shares among locals, then reached a popular community page. People began commenting, some about how rare such kindness had become, others about how the world needed to see more of this. By nightfall, the clip had crossed 100,000 views. By morning, millions. Aisha, meanwhile, knew nothing of this new attention. Her day began the same way it always did, with her mother's tired smile and a rushed goodbye. But as she walked to school that day, people seemed to look at her longer. A man at the bakery waved, and a woman from a nearby stall whispered something to her friend while pointing discreetly. Aisha ignored the strange glances, assuming she had simply imagined them. At school, her classmates gathered around their phones during recess, murmuring about a viral video that made everyone cry. A teacher even mentioned it in passing. A reminder that goodness still exists. The video showed a little girl helping an old lady across the road. The frame was slightly blurry but clear enough to see her small hands and her neat braids. Some of her classmates wondered if it was Aisha, but she stayed quiet, unsure whether to admit it. By afternoon, reporters were visiting the bakery. They wanted to know who the little girl was. The bakery owner had already shared what he knew: her name, her school, the time she crossed the road every morning. When Aisha walked home that evening, a few cameras waited near the crossing. She didn't understand why until one woman gently asked if she was the little girl from the video. Confused, Aisha nodded. Flashbulbs popped. A few strangers applauded. Someone asked her how it felt to be famous, but she didn't know how to answer. To her, it was never about being seen. She had simply done what anyone should do. Across the city, the old woman from the video also saw the footage, sitting in a quiet, elegant home far from the noise of the streets. Her name was Mrs. Meera Rao, a retired school principal, widowed and living alone in a large house filled with memories. Watching the clip, her eyes welled up not only with emotion but recognition. She remembered the girl's steady hand, the warmth of her small palm, and the purity in her eyes. But there was something more, something she had not revealed to the little girl, something she had been carrying quietly for years, waiting for a reason to share it. Watching that video, Mrs. Rao knew the time had come. The world had seen an act of kindness. Now it was her turn to return it. She began to write a letter that evening, her pen shaking slightly as she addressed it to the little girl who had reminded her that compassion still existed in a world that often forgot. The city buzzed with stories about the mysterious old woman from the viral clip. No one knew who she was, only that her gentle smile lingered in every frame. But soon the truth would unfold, and when it did, it would change Aisha's life forever. The next morning dawned slower than usual, as though the city itself was still blinking in disbelief over the story that had captured its heart. The video of the little girl helping the elderly woman had now reached millions. News anchors discussed it. Social media overflowed with praise, and hashtags filled timelines. People across the country watched the clip with teary eyes, rediscovering a simple truth: that kindness still existed, even in the smallest hearts. But while the world debated, analyzed, and applauded, Aisha herself remained unaware of the storm she had stirred. To her, it had been nothing more than a passing moment, one act of goodness before another ordinary day. Fame meant nothing when her lunchbox was still half empty, and her mother still left for work before sunrise. At school, however, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Teachers smiled warmly at her. Classmates whispered her name with a mix of awe and envy. The principal even called her to the office, not to scold her as Aisha feared, but to praise her for being a symbol of humanity. The words felt too big for her small heart to carry. She returned to her seat in silence, wondering why doing the right thing felt suddenly so strange under everyone's gaze. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the city, Mrs. Meera Rao folded the letter she had written the night before. Her handwriting, though trembling with age, was clear, deliberate, and filled with emotion. She placed the letter into a cream-colored envelope and sealed it carefully, as though protecting something sacred. She had been a teacher her whole life, once firm, once admired, once surrounded by children whose names she could still recall if she closed her eyes long. Enough. But the years had grown quieter after retirement. Her husband's passing had taken with it the sound of laughter from her house. The world had moved on without her, and she had accepted her solitude as quietly as dust settles on a bookshelf. Until that morning. The day Aisha took her hand at the crosswalk, Mira had been returning from a hospital appointment. Her legs ached, her vision blurred at times, and she had begun to feel invisible to the city she once helped educate. That little hand that reached for hers had not just helped her cross the road. It had pulled her back across the loneliness she had silently accepted. That touch had awakened something long asleep inside her. When she saw the viral video, Mira realized the universe had conspired to bring them together. She knew what she wanted to do, not out of charity but gratitude. By afternoon, she had made a few phone calls. The video had spread far enough that finding the girl wasn't hard. The bakery owner gave her the name, the school, and the crossing where they met. The old woman smiled to herself. Fate, it seemed, had given her a second chance. To repay kindness with kindness. Love with love. That evening, as the sun fell behind the high buildings and painted the sky with amber streaks, a car stopped near the same crosswalk. A few people noticed, but no one paid much attention as an elderly woman stepped out, holding a small parcel and an envelope in her wrinkled hands. Her eyes searched the crowd, and there, walking with her usual rhythm, was Aisha, her tiny figure almost swallowed by the crowd. Mira watched her from a short distance, her heart warming at the sight of the girl's focus and humility. When Aisha approached the crossing, she stopped beside the same spot they had shared days ago. Her eyes met the old woman's, and recognition lit her face. Mira smiled softly, and though Aisha didn't speak, her eyes reflected that same gentle kindness from before. The old woman stepped closer and handed her the envelope. Aisha hesitated, unsure whether to accept it, but Mira nodded kindly. She placed her other hand on Aisha's head for a brief moment, a silent blessing, before turning away. No reporters, no cameras this time. Just two souls, once strangers, now bound by the invisible thread of humanity. When Aisha reached home, she placed the envelope on the table. Her mother, exhausted from another long shift, opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written in elegant, slanting handwriting and a folded document that made her breath catch. The letter read, "Dear Aisha, that day, when you took my hand and guided me across the road, you did more than help an old woman. You reminded me of everything I once believed in: kindness, innocence, and faith in people. I spent decades teaching children, but that day, a child became my teacher. I have lived long enough to know that true wealth does not lie in money, but in the ability to see another's need and respond without hesitation. I wanted to thank you in a way that ensures your kindness continues to grow. Not just for you, but for others you might one day help. Enclosed with this letter is a scholarship fund I've created in your name. It will cover your education through university. You will never have to worry about fees, uniforms, or books again. All I ask is that you never stop doing what made you who you are: giving, helping, believing. With love and blessings, Mira Rao." Tears welled in Aisha's mother's eyes as she read the words aloud. Her hands trembled as she held the document confirming the scholarship. Years of struggle, of skipped meals and silent prayers, had suddenly found an answer through the unlikeliest of miracles: her daughter's kindness. Aisha didn't fully understand what it meant, but she understood enough to feel the weight of something pure. She sat quietly beside her mother, her small hand resting on hers. The world outside buzzed with news and praise, but inside that small home, the silence was sacred. The next morning, the story reached the news again. The video that had captured hearts was now followed by another headline: "Viral video's old lady revealed as retired principal. Grants full scholarship to kind-hearted girl." The world rejoiced once more. But for Aisha and Mira, it wasn't about the headlines. For Mira, it was a return of faith in the younger generation. A reminder that her life's work as a teacher still echoed in small, living acts of goodness. For Aisha, it was the realization that kindness, no matter how small, could ripple far beyond its moment. Weeks later, Aisha visited Mrs. Mira at her home. The old woman welcomed her like a granddaughter, and together they sat in the garden, sharing slices of mango and stories of hope. Two generations, bound by one crossing, had found in each other something that the modern world rarely gives: genuine connection. Time would pass, and the world would move on to new stories, new headlines. But somewhere in that city, at that same crossing, people still remembered the little girl and the old woman. The bakery owner kept a still frame from the video on his wall, not as content, but as a reminder that sometimes all it takes to change a life, or perhaps two, is the courage to stop, extend a hand, and walk together through life's busy roads.